We're glad to have you back. The biting scarcity of premium auto spirit, also known as petrol, which has hit the Federal Capital Territory since more than a month now, became more acute over the weekend and spread nationwide with few queues on a scale not seen in recent times, and the product selling for more than 1,000 naira per litre in some places. The scarcity led to disruption of commercial and social activities across the country: Lagos, Kaduna, Kano, Port Harcourt, and as well as Niger, Nasarawa, and several other states. Many filling stations shut down their operations due to severe undersupply of PMS. This is really worrisome, considering the fact that the much talked about Petroleum Industry Act is already been implemented. But the issues around crude oil supply and local refining has been on the front burner of regulators and operators in the oil and gas industry operating in the country. Ebitonye Ate is the leading macroeconomic macro research analyst. He joins me to talk more about this. Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. I think we should start with the present situation in Nigeria's oil and gas industry, particularly with the focus on downstream management of the industry. There's been back and forth around thunderstorms not allowing them offload, vessels not being able to do this. There's been so much back and forth along that downstream segment of the industry. Can you take us through what you make of this?
Okay, so firstly, I think about 2022, the PIA was passed, and I think I came on the show with you also, and we spoke about how we're, cautiously optimistic, and we're hoping for no policy backturns to, especially for the downstream, upstream sector as well. So essentially, what is happening right now is kind of what has been happening over the last couple of years, where there's one sole importer of white product, which is PMS. And then that sole importer obviously is the NNPC, and they have to distribute it around the country. So right now, there's obviously a situation of just forex constraints, I was saying, in our general macroeconomics, in our general macroeconomic. And that forex constraints is obviously, hindering price discovery, essentially. So other private importers can come in. So there's only one sole distributor. Again, as a forex constraint, distribution constraints, and then pricing discovery. Essentially, that is the main thing that we're going through right now: pricing discovery. So there's shortages, and there's still talk of under recovery and subsidy in downstream sector. And lastly, there's a general. We're in a cost of living crisis. If you want to look at it, household income has remained relatively flat or even gone down slightly. Real household income is like 2017. So essentially, because of the way the fuel subsidies and the way Nigerians view PMS, or the government views PMS, it's almost like a public good. So it's a very difficult decision to be able to not subsidize that, because people have been used to that since we've been operating for a long time.
But I remember that this issue of subsidy removal has been on for some time, and everyone was talking about, even the three presidential candidates in their series of interviews maintained that they were going to take off subsidy. So I want us to understand, if I go to my next question, that what really is wrong with the subsidy removal, because even at the moment, it is still clear that there is still a differential. The landing cost is about 1,000 naira, if not even more. So can we just clarify all of this before we move to the second part of our discussion?
Yeah, so I think generally it is a very difficult decision. If you look at the fiscal imbalance of Nigeria, so for instance, now last year alone, the subsidy on the recovery program and the energy security program, which is also a subsidy in a way, was 5 trillion naira. The budget for this year alone is 27. So you're looking at it as about 20% of the budget alone goes on just PMS subsidy. We're not even going to electricity subsidies in its own right as well. So essentially, it's a very tough decision because, again, as you said, the country, we've been growing at relatively slow rates, for instance. And again, there's a lot of energy insufficiency in Nigeria. So it's essentially looked upon as a public good. But that those decisions over the last couple of years.
Mr. Tay, are you still there?
Hello?
Okay, now
Yeah, I'm here.
The NNPC just declared profit for the year end 2023. Precisely 3.3 trillion naira. Let me say, what is your reaction to this development from the national oil company? I know it's less to what you get from the likes of Saudi Aramco and all of that. But what would you say about what what NNPC has done? Did you get that question?
I mean, the result in naira terms, yeah, as you said. So that's one thing we just. Yeah, I did get a question. Yeah, the result is quite robust. NNPC balance sheet is quite robust, and the result is the revenue is 23.9 trillion, from 8.8 trillion the previous year. So that's about a 14 trillion increase in revenue. That's about 300 increase in top line. So sale from crude also went up about 300%. Then sales from petroleum products, natural gas also increased. But then first thing that you just need to start upon is that generally a lot of the NNPC transactions are done in USD. So obviously the exchange rate devaluation obviously led to that increased boost in naira terms. But regardless of that, they're quite resilient, and 3 trillion PAT is quite strong. Yes, but again, if you want to look at margin efficiency, actually, so this subsidy that we're talking about now, and the buying of petroleum products actually took about 9 trillion out in terms of cost. So if you look at last year, NNPC made 8 trillion, but PAT was 2 trillion. That's profit after tax. This year they made 23 trillion, and PAT was 3 trillion. So actually the margin is actually shrunk. If you want to look at PAT. Because PAT margin in 2023 is 13.7 trillion, and in the previous year is 28.6 trillion. So actually, they were more efficient in the previous year. So even regardless of the profit, so I mean, it's a good result. Just more increased margin efficiency, so that we'll be able to see these flows come into the Nigerian economy.
Now, back to fuel scarcity, which has become a recurrent decimal in recent times. There's been this back and forth. And local refining is supposed to come to our aid, but the challenges seems to be same by the day. Subsidy issues resurfacing, I said that earlier, as the product remains available. Now, is this supposed to be the fallout of this PIA we've been talking about?
No, this is not what was intended. Again, as I said, we had this conversation 2 years ago. We did. Very optimistic. So I mean, the idea of the PIA generally, try for a downstream sector, which is where, the upstream sector, yeah, there's going to be increased royalties, less taxation, but more taxes on top end to go straight to the government before even production. But the idea of the downstream sector, there were a lot of things that were supposed to come out of the downstream sector. The first thing was the removal of the subsidy or under recovery program or energy security. And that was the first thing. So that was going to was just going to be like maybe when we were younger, when you see more maybe international firms or even local indigenous firms going into the downstream sector, and they have their margins where they can play, they have price recovery. Actually, the PIA actually states a couple of things. I think Section 122 states that it repeals the PPPRA Act. So essentially, how the authority was going to do it now was that the downstream authority was that they all come together, stakeholder meeting, and they all decide on pricing templates. I don't believe that that's happening currently. It's more like prices being set, and then landing cost and pump price is the difference. NNPC is still the retailers margin that the downstream firms are getting. And that thing that we're going to see from it was essentially it was just essentially price discovery, like with regards to setting price, people can come in, cost reflective price. That's actually what's written there. But obviously, at this point, we're not in a cost reflective price environment. And also, the other thing that actually was in the PIA was that if the cost of the product would actually be phrased in the foreign currency, and then it would be changed at the naira differential in the PIA. So in a situation where we are in a foreign exchange crisis, I think that's one of the reasons why you're not seeing the implementation of this bill, of this act, because it's actually written there that the pricing and the sourcing of the products, the petroleum products, will be in foreign currency, and then it will be converted at the benchmark. So if we're to do that at this point, add all the transportation costs and all those things, we're looking at 1,000 something most likely. So yeah, I as we said, the things that we said earlier, and current cost of living crisis, new government coming into play, just essentially inflationary pressures. So essentially all those things that want to and obviously there's a political aspect to it as well, and socioeconomic aspect to it. So one of the reasons why we're not seeing this PIA essentially being fully implemented in downstream sector. But however, that is hurting inflows and are coming into the downstream sector. For instance, now our research team showed that capital importation in 2017 for oil and gas sector was $720 million. In Q1 2024, it was zero. So there's no money coming in to the sector at all, no investment.
Yes, let's talk about investments. Now, you've touched on it already. Investments. We need to attract more investment into the oil and gas industry, and we see some divestment. We've seen companies move away. I think most from the upstream side, people are moving. We also have issues, and the PIA is supposed to address this investment drive. And gas is also there. That government is trying to focus on gas, proven and unproven reserves of gas. Government intends to take advantage of all of this. How do we leverage on all of this to generate more revenue for government? Like many will say, Nigeria still needs oil to even develop, despite moves aimed at diversifying the economy. Are you there?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple things that can be done.
Mr. Ateka, are you there? Yeah, I think we'll get him back to continue this discussion. Attracting investment into Nigeria's oil and gas industry is something that is very important. We've seen a lot of moves, even executive orders by the president, particularly focused on this segment of the economy. There's been a lot of issues around the investment.
Hello,
go ahead. Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's infrastructure issues, so we'll just go straight into it, I guess.
Go ahead.
So, yes, one of the things is, I mean, just look at it, oil and gas sector, downstream, upstream, it can still be, you can compartmentalize it, but essentially it's still the same things. So the first thing is obviously the allowance of price discovery in the downstream sector. If you were to allow that, in the longer term, you will see more investments come into it, and then that will offset this fiscal imbalance that we're seeing. 5 trillion over a 25 trillion budget is not realistic. It's about 20-something% of the budget. That money can be used for capex investment. It can be used for investments. It can be used for capital investment. It can be used for investments in physical infrastructure. It can be used for education. Those other things that will actually now build capital and for people to grow. Essentially just add more value rather than spend it on an expense. And I think that you would want to be looking at, obviously, I guess they're covering the issues around theft in the upstream sector. I know there's more engagement with the local communities, and they put some people there as essentially players to watch that. And then the cost of drilling in Nigeria is still relatively high. I think it's one of the highest in the world. It's almost as high as drilling shale in some places. Obviously, this is because of the old infrastructures we're talking about. No access to ports. Again, it's an infrastructure issue. So yeah, just essentially there's a lot of underinvestment because of infrastructure. There's obviously government position and government tone as well. I think that can be improved, especially with the refinery situation that we're seeing now. And essentially, just I think that's just reduce government involvement in the oil and gas sector. Essentially, more privatization. I think government's role should be more of just setting the tone. And then you should open up the sector for private investment. I believe so.
Let's wrap this conversation up with issues around improving crude production. This is very important for federal government to generate more revenue. You know what I'm talking about. If we can do 2 million or 2.5 million at the moment, I think even local refineries will be able to get crude from the NNPC. What's your position on the matter with regard, because all theft is eating deep into the fabric of Nigeria's economy?
Yes, oil theft is a big issue. There's been oil theft and vandalism. Nigeria is doing like 1.3, 1.4 for the last 2 years. About 7 years ago, we stood about 1.8 to 2 million barrels per day. So there's a lot of lost, in fact, there's a lot of lost revenue, in the oil theft situation. But also, oil theft is not the only issue, as we said. Just essentially positioning and posturing of the tone of and even just there's some other deals that are being for about 2 years now. We're still waiting for the Mobile deal. I think there's some sale of some Shell assets as well. So essentially, just increase the posturing and show that Nigeria is open for business, whether it's downstream, upstream, midstream, and then we'll be able to see, because essentially we do need this oil, because at this point it's our most viable resource that we can use to now diversify our economy. But we cannot move on without it, regardless. So I believe that just posturing is the first thing, and then after that, sort out the vandalism, engage local communities, build more, just essentially like just more ESG kind of stuff, like what we are seeing with firms that operate in local communities, just more local community engagement. I know they already do that. And essentially, just more like open posturing, and Nigeria is open for business. Because right now, we want to avoid the situation of less of a leaner government, essentially, so that, because now what we're saying is that we're in a situation of fiscal imbalance, and we need to bring in tax revenues to obviously support our revenue. So essentially, just posturing. I think posturing is very important in the oil and gas sector, and also just making sure that you go on with the reforms that you have already passed. Because as we said, the PIA is a bill that has a lot of huge potential to open various parts, whether it's gas, whether it's downstream, whether it's upstream, whether it's midstream. But what we've seen that is half and half implementation, and that is obviously slowing down investment in the oil and gas sector and even other commodity sectors, as you see.
Well, it's a good way to live it. I would thank you so much. Mr. Bitoyate is a leading macro research analyst. Do enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for your time.
Enjoy yourself too.
All right, then. Well, let's take a break.